As you can tell by the garb, winter is well upon us here in the northern hemisphere. That means very short days and long evenings with not very much to do these days. Bars are shut, we're in lockdown, can't visit my local flying site. All rather disappointing. However, it does give us the opportunity to visit some of those kits that have been sitting on one side, in this case for more than a couple of years, I'm ashamed to admit. Time to put it together, and this I've seen could be interesting as there appear to be multiple versions depending on what you find in the box. What we're seeing first is some rather attractively cut foam with the scary eagle's head. Take a closer look at these things. By the way, if you can hear some rather strange noises in the background, that's my 3D printer whirring and clunking away. Yes, then a rather fearsome looking eagle, if somewhat fragile. Some rather splendid looking wings then. Nice spray job done on those. And just in case we didn't know, this is a dancing wings model. As well as the foam then in the bottom of the box, well secured, we have some ply. Looks to be laser cut, very nice. That appears to be the prop adapter. Stuck down in the bottom of the box there, a strip of carbon fibre, and the traditional looking bag with a rather large propeller. And I'm sure these elastic bands have probably perished by this time. Interestingly, some glue. Although they've included glue, I will still be using my glue of choice for foam, the Yoo-Hoo Pour. Without further ado then, let's see if we can make some sense of the instructions coming up next. Starting the assembly with the replacement instructions, then the first thing is to glue in the wing support stroke servo mount. I've gone ahead and done that, just using the dowels to line up the holes there while that glue dried. Now, something strikes me as being rather odd. It just shows the motor mount glued in the front quite close to the beak with nothing supporting it at all. In the original design, you can't quite see it here, but the ply piece goes right to the front of the beak, and the firewall in that design was similar to the servos in that it had locating tabs which would glue into these side pieces, which would at least give it some support and structural integrity. However, this design, now I'm no structural engineer, but the weight of this, just supported by the foam there by the beak, so that the propeller obviously clears the front there by a small margin, is a recipe for disaster. The first time that hits the deck, and believe me, it's going to, the whole front is just going to break off. What to do then? My idea then is to make some ply plates, which I can glue over there, put a reinforcement piece on there, and then glue the motor mount to this. That strikes me as being a much better idea, even though it's going to add some weight to the nose. Let's just rewind and see how I cut this out. This is how I'm going to make the reinforcement for the eagle's head then, just sketched around the outside to give me the shape, and we are going to need 2. This is perhaps a little heavier than I would have liked. This is, I've just measured just under 2mm, which I guess makes it 1/16 of an inch. Hopefully we'll be able to compensate for the weight by shuffling the battery around to get the correct C of G. That's another story in itself, I think. What I like to do is to join the 2 pieces of wood together before I cut them, clearly. And there are 2 types of double-sided tape that I use. This with the white is more like a carpet tape, and once that's stuck you have a job to get it apart again, whereas this stuff is more like just a normal double-sided sellotape. That's going to be my weapon of choice. Something like that. and I'm going to cut that out using my Dremel scroll saw. No apologies for the state of this machine, it's probably older than the majority of people viewing this. There, not too shabby, a little bit of sanding, and we should be good. Whilst the glue on the other parts is drying, then let's take a look at the wing assembly. Not the fuselage assembly, the wing assembly. The first part is to glue these wingtips on. Now this appears to be a process more by guess and by God, and it says to put the glue on the white part of the wingtips. But some of this is going to be cut off, it's excess. It makes more sense then, at least to me, to put the glue on this part here. Then we need to offer up as close as possible to this aerofoil shape, something like that, a little bit at the edge there. You can see there that there's going to be a goodly amount that needs to be trimmed off afterwards, hence my decision to put the glue on here. Let's see how we get on. That appears to be close enough, and maybe just to hold that in place we'll push in a couple of good old-fashioned T-pins. Hopefully that will hold it in place whilst the glue dries. The other part of the trailing edge will go on after I've trimmed that off, I think. And that again appears to be by guess and by God. I don't believe there's any angle required on there. Just put it on as straight as possible. I know that people do convert these into ailerons, but I'm not going to bother with that from the get-go. Get on now and do the other wingtip. I've stuck the trailing edge on and just put some masking tape over it to hold it in place. It's now quite firm, so I can remove that. The next task then will be to remove the excess, for which I'm going to use one of these really handy little razor saws. I should be able to get that and just keep it straight on the wing there. Let's see how we go. There, quite a neat finish. The next job on the wing then is to glue the two pieces together. In the instructions they say to glue the two pieces together and then afterwards insert the strip. That seems a bit odd to me. What I'm going to do is to use the strip itself to align the two halves. I'm going to make sure I've got more than sufficient glue on here for obvious reasons. I don't see any way to easily keep those together. I'm just going to weight them down and push them together on the table. Well, there's not much more I can do than to wait for that glue to set. Now it's time, I guess, to get back to the fuselage assembly. Location of the motor mount then I've tried to make as close to the original design as possible. The width here just fits inside the beak, if you will, and the motor has sufficient clearance for the propeller. This is going to be, as you can see, it's parallel to the body there. Any adjustments to thrust angle, etc. will be done by offsetting this part of the motor mount with some washers. Belt and braces, I've cut some little bits of strip which I'm going to epoxy either side of there and obviously on the inside of the other piece. I'll go ahead and get that done now. The final part of the wing assembly then is the reinforcements for the rubber bands, a little carbon strip along the back there and one underneath. Got those clamped and drying now. For the front protection, I thought that to make it a little bit stronger against frontal impact, yes, I am paranoid about crashing, I've just cut a slot along there, and in this instance I'm going to be using some foam safe Sino to put that in place. And I didn't even manage to Sino my thumb to it. A couple of pegs just to hold that in place. Don't think I'll need any accelerator on that. The job's a good un. Making some progress now. I bolted the motor onto the firewall and included a couple of washers on the side here to give it a little bit of right thrust and also a little bit of down thrust. I've attached the speed controller, but I've not tested it for direction yet, but we've got these bullet type connectors here, so that will be easy to change. I've installed the servos just screwed in with the wood screws provided there, and I made sure that I centered them using my servo tester before I put the servo horns on. Give me a good starting point. I'm not going to put the top or bottom covers on yet because I haven't decided exactly where the battery and things are likely to be. I have to check the CFG first. The next step then will be to put on the tail feathers using this piece of triangular strip wood provided. Now that's 1/2 inch. What I've done then is to mark out the center and 1/4 inch either side, little markers there that I'll be able to line that piece up with and just eyeball it down the center there. It should be good. I'll get on and do that and then show you the assembly of the tail feathers. With the fuselage weighted down onto the table, I've just set up my T-square as the tail feathers are at 90 degrees to each other, and I've just held that in place with a little machinist vise that I 3D printed. These sheets obviously are flexible and not exactly straight. As you can see there, slight curve. I've tried to get it out as best I can. Going to have to pay attention once the glue is setting up to make sure that they are straight on there. Probably best to do these one at a time. Just gluing the tail feathers on with the standard Yoo-hoo paw made them very flexible, which was not a good idea. What I've done then, I'm not sure if we can see along here, but I've put a fillet of epoxy along each side, and that has stiffened things up significantly. It also has these pre-fitted carbon reinforcements. Added the control horns and glued them in place. You have to open up one of the holes. The one at the end seems to be the most sort of in line. I've opened that up. I'm going to use some heat shrink tubing to keep that in place once I'm finally happy with it. Not being a petrol pilot, I don't have any silicone tubing. The servo horns then, I drilled out the second to last hole. I think it's an M2 screw, and I wouldn't go right to the end as it wouldn't leave enough of the arm left to hold it securely. So the second one in is drilled out. The pre-supplied connectors there, put the nut on the bottom and Loctited that on. That's all good to go. I've checked that with my servo tester and we've got more than enough throw on both of the control surfaces. As you can see, I've also now glued the bottom in. I had to trim that out, the places where I put in the ply reinforcement for the front there. Not a bad job. There we have it for the moment. The next stage will be to get the receiver in place and to test the control surfaces and make sure that they're moving in the correct fashion as a V-tail. The receiver I'm going to use is this make which cannot be named, Futaba compatible type thing, and overkill at 8 channels. We only need the 3 there, obviously, for the 2 servos and the throttle. I've set up this simple mix on channel 1 and 2 to do the V-tail mixing. To get the control surfaces moving in the correct fashion, I've ended up swapping over the 2 control rods, as changing the mixing was frankly doing my head in. Now then, if we connect up the power on the transmitter, then if I move to the right, we have the right going up and the left going down, and vice versa. If I pull down elevator, they go up and then down. So that appears to be all moving in the correct fashion with the correct amount of travel. Possibly a bit too much, but we will find out. The final thing I'm going to do then is to put the propeller on and give it a quick check to see how much current it's drawing. I fitted on the little prop adapter, just making sure to put some thread locker on those screws there. Now I've seen people having all sorts of fun trying to get the little O-ring over the top of the propeller. So I'll show you a little trick that I use, making sure the propeller's the right way around with the lettering on the front there. What I use is a little hex driver, this sort of screwdriver that has the set of bits, and simply putting that over the top of the head of the screw, and it folds straight over there. Now to find my current meter, and we'll see what the current draw is. The battery I'm going to be using is this 2200 mAh 3S pack. I use this in my Bixler, which is of a similar size. And as always, safety squints when doing anything like this. If you think I'm a sissy, then take a look up there. The propeller clear of any obstructions. Let's connect the battery up. Let's see what we get. On the meter then, 7.82 amps peak, 93.8, 94 watts. That should be more than adequate. This thing's not going to be a rocket ship, it's meant really as a slow flyer. That then is in the right ballpark. I think the final thing for this video is temporarily put the wing on and see where we get our centre of gravity and where I can fit the battery. As with many things to do with the instructions for this model, the position of the centre of gravity is multiple choice. On this set it says 80 millimeters, and on the other set 60 millimeters. Where is it going to be? Looking under the wing, we'll see the main spar there, which is spookily 80 millimeters from the leading edge. So that's probably where the 80 millimeter figure came from. Accepted wisdom would normally be that the centre of gravity would be somewhere between the main spar and the leading edge, but not too far. Therefore 60 millimeters is going to be in this area here. Looking at things from a convenience for the battery point of view, just here underneath the main wing obviously would be the easiest place to put it. With the battery in that location, then let's put the wing on and see where it balances. By the way, the supplied bands are actually fine. I thought they were going to be perished after all the time they've been waiting, but they're okay. Put our ruler on the top there. So 60 millimeters is about there. Let's see how close we are to that. There it is then at 60, pretty much just level. I think I prefer it to be a little bit more nose heavy. Let's then bring the battery forward just a little. And there, I think as a starting point for the C of G, that is where we're going to go for. The next time then that you see this bird will be its maiden flight. Wish me luck.